Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Jedi Master Cilia Maz. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi Temple. We are venturing out yet again to that galaxy far, far away for an episode of The Mandalorian Season 3, much touted at the time of its release for some very timely cameos. Cilia Maz, take me through and take Lord Uther back through this interesting entry into Season 3 of Mando.
Thank you, Jedi Masters, Lord Uther and Ursa Master. And thanks, Graying Jedi fans, as we are now on the back nine, or rather the back four, of Mandalorian Season 3, fast approaching the climactic concluding chapters. This one is Guns for Hire, and it aired pretty close to April Fool's Day, but not quite. April 5th, 2023. We have very familiar faces behind the camera and on the keyboard.
So that's why.
There you have it. Jon Favreau, of course, is your writer. Bryce Dallas Howard returns for her third episode. She has done one episode each season of The Mandalorian. We first saw her work in Sanctuary, which we talked about right here on the Graying Jedi number 20. Sanctuary, you remember Din Djarin and Grogu and Cara Dune. In fact, it was the episode that introduced us to Cara Dune. On that forest sanctuary world, you had a bunch of krill farmers who were being harassed by mercenaries who had gotten their own Imperial Scout Walker to terrorize them, and in a very Seven Samurai kind of way, Din Djarin and Cara Dune taught the villagers how to stand up and fight for themselves and overthrow the mercenaries and the Scout Walker. So that was Bryce's first, showed that she could handle action. Her second episode also was action-packed, The Heiress, and that was where she introduced us to Bo-Katan Kryze in the flesh in Season 2, and we talked about that on Graying Jedi number 25. And that was set on the water world, and it ended up having Bo-Katan recruiting Din Djarin to attack that Imperial transport ship that she then later steals and makes as part of her Mandalorian armada. So, Ron Howard's daughter, she's well versed in the Star Wars universe. She's still an accomplished actress, doing things like the Jurassic World franchise and so forth. So she knows what's going on, and they tried to do something a little bit different here. And again, opinions will vary, but let me kind of take you through real quick what they were thinking. First of all, knowing that they had a tense two-part season finale coming up for this season, they decided to go a little lighter in parts with this episode, not quite so heavy. We had just come out of the previous chapter, The Pirate, where there was a big battle for Navarro, and you had ships and planes exploding and so forth. So they tried to keep the tone a little bit more, not necessarily full-on comedy, but definitely trying to keep it before you got to the real heavy stuff at the end of the season. Also, Jon Favreau had heard that there were several fans of the show who were keeping up with it on social media, on TikTok and Instagram. And he decided to reach out as showrunner producer and actually invite them on to perform for the show. Jack Black had been doing Instagram, TikTok recaps of The Mandalorian. Very enthusiastic, as you imagine Jack Black might. So he was invited to play the former Imperial Commander Bombardier. And Lizzo,
not as good as ours, though.
Yes. And Lizzo, who I guess is now in hot water for how she treats her backup dancers or what have you. But at the time, she was a pop sensation, Grammy Award-winning, singer. And she had been apparently been cosplaying Grogu on social media, and those videos were shown to Jon Favreau by his kids, So he also extended an invitation to her. And then he cast science fiction and television and feature film icon Christopher Lloyd as well. So really for the first time in the modern Star Wars saga, we had not one, not two, but three very familiar faces from outside the universe trying to portray characters in the universe. Now, in the original trilogy, we were probably too young when we first saw it to appreciate this, but Billy D. Williams, who had sung, had appeared with Diana Ross and Lady Sings the Blues and other works, this would have been the equivalent back then of, Billy D. Williams is playing a character in The Empire Strikes Back. His name is Lando Calrissian. So people who were familiar with Billy D. back then might have been taken aback briefly to see him playing a scoundrel administrator of Cloud City. The prequel trilogy gave us Liam Neeson, Natalie Portman, Ewan McGregor, Samuel L. Jackson. So we were starting to get more and more faces that had done work that we appreciated and respected and celebrated becoming part of it. That has stayed true with the sequel trilogies, Adam Driver, Woody Harrelson, and so forth. But this was like a real concentrated blast. It was certainly the biggest for The Mandalorian. We'd never really had three huge sort of guest stars all in a row. The closest we came to was Nick Nolte voicing the Ugnaught Kuiil and Carl Weathers as Grief Karga. But again, Nick Nolte was merely voicing a character, and it was still an Ugnaught running around doing all the action on screen. So he cast them because of their social media fandom. And this is probably where a lot of this episode's controversies have sprung, is that for some people it's a bridge too far to see Lizzo and a smirking Jack Black and an aging Christopher Lloyd all trying to appear as if they're part of this organic story. And I would say the jury is still out. I've seen this episode multiple times. I think the first time I saw it, it felt really jarring, and I'm sure my fellow Jedi Masters will fill in some of those thoughts for us. What Jon Favreau said he was trying to write, though, especially in those early sequences on the planet, he wanted to create a Mad Hatter Tea Party, Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll kind of vibe, and just have things where it was just sort of, strange wildlife, drinking from China and eating at the table and playing lawn croquet and just, that was kind of what they were going for. And if you just look at it on the surface on that, then having just recently rewatched this, I think that's kind of in the ballpark as to what it is. Again, you can judge the success and failure on your own terms, but I kind of get what they were trying to do. I think this episode, even if you were to take away Jack Black and Lizzo to some degree, I think there's a lot of things in it that makes it a key Mandalorian episode. I think the opening prequel, which kind of plays the sequence before the titles, I think that could have been an entire episode in and of itself, where you have a Quarren female who has fallen for a younger Mon Calamari, and Star Wars fans will note that those two aquatic races have been in each other's throats in civil war on the planet Mon Calamari for generations. The idea that they're running off together, she's an older Quarren, he's a younger prince, he's going to renounce his family ties and just wants to be with the love of his life. And then the Mandalorians, who have grown disillusioned with Bo-Katan, they end up have been hired to bring him back. And this Quarren woman basically says, look, I don't want to get blown out of the stars or arrested or anything like that. And she basically just tells her paramour, you need to go home. This was just a fling, and I'm not going to risk my freedom and my future on this. I mean, there's a lot in there in like the first 6 or 7 minutes. And like I said, that could have been an entire 23-minute episode of that, that relationship and so forth. So I think the preamble to this episode is excellent. And I think that we resolve many of the plot issues regarding the Darksaber and Bo-Katan's ascent into leadership of the Mandalorians and so forth. And we do so in a way that had been hiding in plain sight, i.e. the solution to this dilemma. How does she get the Darksaber away from Din Djarin without challenging him to a fight and killing him, or him killing her? They solved this in the second episode of the third season when Din Djarin was incapacitated by that creepy Flash Gordonish mechanical spider thing, and she used that same saber, which he had been taken from him, to free him and destroy the monster. So they'd already solved the problem. They just didn't announce it to us at the time. And I think when Din Djarin tells them, look, this is what happened, and as far as your creed goes and your laws, this should be hers. And they have no choice but to agree. And then he possesses it to her. She lights it up there at the end, and suddenly we are all in alignment for a climactic fight. And then, again, removing the guest stars, the idea of a society who relies on automated droids now, like to their detriment, like where they cannot perform simple tasks or don't want to. Everything from serving food to bringing in the groceries and their luggage, and they've basically become enslaved themselves to an automated society. And you have this, conspiracy, which is done in the style of a mystery and uncovering piece by piece what's going on. So that's pretty interesting. But you have these droids, this wonderful scene in the droid bar, where actually it's the Mandalorians who are, their kind is not served there. A nice inverse of the cantina from Mos Eisley. But the droids say, look, some of us have been around since before the Clone Wars, and we're headed for the scrap heap, but this society has made us feel useful again, and that's all of our programming wants us to do, is feel useful. And that line hit me the moment I had seen it for the first time, this idea that droids, even though they are basically just a series of binary, codes, they still might want to fulfill said programming in this service of their quote masters. And there's a whole other onion you can unpeel in the Star Wars universe or the science fiction universe. It almost sounds like a Star Trek, like what if pondering of do droids have feelings and so forth, what is ultimately who is doing right by them, and so on and so forth. So like I said, we can complain that there were too many familiar faces, and we can complain that they didn't quite bring the necessary gravitas or something that you might convince you that they belong in this universe. And that's a fair point. And like I said, I hope my Jedi Masters will expound on that. But I think there's too much else in the episode that really does dovetail nicely with what we've been seeing throughout 3 seasons to just dismiss it all as, pshaw, that was, a complete piffle. I don't see that at all. Once you look at, again, the roadmap as to where they're trying to get to and where they've already been. So, gentlemen, that being said, I welcome the slings and arrows, as I'm sure many of our Graying Jedi fans go. How do you go with this star-studded Star Wars? Yep.
I tend to agree that I think there were pieces of what could have been a really great episode at the beginning of the show. If they would have told that story, that would have been great. If they would have told the droid story without Jack Black and Lizzo, even with, I think Christopher Lloyd actually did a good job. Without Jack Black and Lizzo and the whole Tea Party scene, not bringing them into it that way and doing some other method of bringing them into this fold, that could have worked. I think the Mandalorian part of it was perfect. I thought that was executed excellently. My beef is that they had 2 good episodes crammed into one, split in half by some crazy Alice in Wonderland nonsense to shoehorn Jack Black and Lizzo into an episode to sell tickets.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. In another context, I think that could have worked. I don't think it's a good Mandalorian episode. That could have made an interesting Ahsoka episode, maybe, or maybe even an Obi-Wan episode where it's kind of a lighthearted sort of hijinks. Obi-Wan's trying to maintain his anonymity, and they're almost spoiling it at this dinner party because the drunk uncle knows who he is, but nobody else really does, and he's trying the whole time to like not spill the beans. To be honest, that would make a funny episode. I could get along with it. Would it be a great episode? No. But it would be funny and it would be interesting, and I could see that if they do a season 2 of Obi-Wan, because I think some royal hijinks plays well with Alderaan. I gotta say, it felt really forced, especially with the whole "can I hold the baby?" and then she's feeding him fish. That, like, to me, I turned it off both times now that I've watched this episode. At that point, I'm like, ugh, I'm gonna have to come back to this later. It felt not just like a fan service thing, because typically I like fan service, but it really felt like they were trying to attract Lizzo fans and people who like Jack Black. Now, I think they could have done one or the other, but putting both together was like the worst kind of yin and yang, which is a fangirl mixed with Lizzo of Star Wars. And frankly, no disrespect to Jack Black, but he is Jack Black in everything now.
Yeah.
He is not the shallow Hal Jack Black who did a phenomenal job in that movie. Now he's pretty much inseparable from his Tenacious D persona, and I could not unsee that in this episode.
Right.
His mannerisms, his exuberance. I get what he was trying to do. It's hard to separate those two, and I wish I could, because I do like Jack Black, but it's hard. This is really tough. And then you pair him up with Lizzo, who, to be honest, is not an actor and did an okay acting job, but really came across as shoehorned in. Now, had she just been the only cameo, similarly to just having Jack Black, I think it could have worked. It would have just had to have been different. I don't think it had to be serious. I think it could have still been a little bit offbeat, but I also think the fact that they couldn't pick a specific story kind of ruined it for me, because the love story angle was like, wow, this is cool. Like, this would be an interesting, and maybe this is the hopeful fangirl in me, I really want the Din Djarin and Bo-Katan Kryze love story. I want it so bad. And that would have played in perfectly. They could have figured out a way to pass her the Darksaber through that. They could have figured out a way to set up some real tension through that for like later in the series and future installments. They could have set up a uniting of the Way with the rogue Mandalorians that don't wear the helmets. Like, so much could have been done, and it just feels like a missed opportunity. And I think upon the revisit, that's what makes it worse to me than my first viewing. My original viewing, I didn't care for it that much, but I didn't hate it. It's feeling less successful now because I recognize the bits and pieces they could have put together and made like either a really great episode or like a dual storyline episode of love stories and freedom / like rebellion, and that would have played in with the Mandalorians too. So you could have even meshed those two stories, but you split them in half with this weird celebrity cameo event that just felt like a money grab by Disney.
Oh, this episode was a piffle. It was a piffless, if you ask me. And cramming in characters just to put them in an episode is like trying to get me into my old Glenbard West high school basketball jersey. It just don't fit. And so, I mean, to try and make that happen left such a bad image in my head that I think that the... Sorry, someone's sending me messages. Yes. It made me really think that the third season was something I just could not enjoy, when really I did enjoy it, but this episode just made it that bad. And I'm a Jack Black fan. And I'm a Tenacious D fan. I actually think their music is borderline genius. But he has been overacting so much that it's almost as bad as Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura 2. And I thought you couldn't ever overact that role. And I never thought Jim Carrey could overact. And he did that in Ace Ventura 2. And Jack Black is doing it. Yes. And Jack Black was doing it here. And I just don't. We've talked about this before. You can't waste time in these episodes. There's not enough time to waste time when it's all about time. So, not having enough time to waste this time also takes time away from me and you, the fan. Which, with over 1 million views, we don't want to waste that time.
He needs a time transplant.
It does, Spock. And so, with all that being said, yes, I think they could have done a better job. I feel like they wrote this episode just to get two popular mainstream people into a Star Wars episode for no real reason. It was nice to see Christopher Lloyd. But we knew where it was going the entire time. I don't know about all of you.
No.
We knew that's where it was going to go, and so I'm even kind of okay with that. I do like the episodes though, and we kind of talked about this, where Grogu isn't really front and center, right? So that was giving me a little bit of hope going into this episode, and the Lizzo and Jack Black stuff to me just it ruined it. It ruined it. Luckily, the next two episodes save the season, in my opinion. It ends in, I think there's 2 episodes left or 3 episodes left. 2. Yeah, the last 2 are going to be absolutely wonderful, and but this one, piffle poo. That's for you there. Yes.
I enjoy the piffle. That may actually shine up my rating a little bit because...
Oh, it won't. Not for me, but that's okay.
I mean, there really isn't a whole lot else to say. The one thing I do think was interesting, and I really hope they address this at some point, is the whole droid thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I really would love to see that play out into something more. And that's the thing that I love and hate about this series, is that they're touching on so many potential stories that they're basically acknowledging that everybody's wondering about this. And they're never going to touch it again. They're never going to pick that up, because that doesn't really sell tickets beyond those hardcore fans like us who watch the Graying Jedi podcast religiously and like, subscribe, and share. And to be honest, I think Favreau might make that into a movie or a series, but he would do it for us. He would do it for the ones who really want to see that, and it wouldn't make enough money to be viable in this day and age. That being said, I think that could be a low-budget show. And that's something, I'm going to be honest, I think Star Wars kind of needs. There's so many big-budget things out there that the low budget or the medium budget is kind of lost in Hollywood right now. I mean, there's still a few, but to have a low budget Star Wars droid movie or series would be tremendous. Whether it's animated or, practical effects. I mean, I don't care if it's puppets. I think it could be really good.
But you're both bringing up great points. There was 2 great stories. One of them, well, actually, maybe in both of them, they didn't dive into enough, because even I felt like the droid story was kind of a quick thing. Why not do a Star Wars legacy like they want to do a Star Trek and tell some of these stories? And we've all said it too, and though I know Urza Master leans into it a little bit more, and take the Jedi out of it. We've seen the success of taking the Jedi out of things, and Andor. To me, Han Solo, right, or the Solo story, which I still think is severely underrated. Why not? Even if it's a Disney Plus show that you throw out there and you do 10 episodes, because the Star Trek Legacy thing is going to bomb just from the trailers we've seen. But I think there's a lot of stories out there to be told that could be done so in a way such as that. That's all. And by the way, how come it goes from Cillian Moss down to Urza Master? Like, we're all on this angle here. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
I have
Is
an
it in
opposite
order of how much we like the episode?
Yes.
Because this guy to my right over here who's wearing a green shirt is going to give it a green, and then I think you're going to go blue, Urza, and we all know where I'm going because I'm foreshadowing it right here. So
Let's get into it. Let's just talk about it. What are our Kyber Crystal ratings falling out, Silly Maz? Has Lord Uther predicted correctly tonight?
Of course I did.
Beep. We're going to go with an Indiana Pacers blue on this one. Because, again, even at my most Star Warsian Lovian, I do acknowledge that, that there was just a little too much eye candy. Just like in the Book of Boba Fett, I know the candy-colored scooters really threw Urza Master off for about an episode and a half before he grabbed those Rancor reins and retook control. If we go back and look, though, Jedi Master Lord Uther, you've been pretty positive on this season to date. So yes, this one must have really thrown you askew. It's like hitting an asteroid and losing your deflector shields. But thankfully, you are able to pull out of that tailspin and not crash land on some swamp planet, with monsters there that can swallow your astromech. So I am pleased. But yes, overall, particularly where it landed, if this had again been maybe the second episode of the season, maybe that you would have had more time for an upward trajectory. So I'm going blue. I think for the reasons we discussed, it's a solid Mandalorian. It does not reach the heights that we normally hold of it, but I'm not prepared to throw out the Walrus Man with the bathwater here. So I'm going to go blue from the Hoosier State.
Fair enough. I as well am going cushion blue for my gaming chair behind me, or perhaps pending rebrand blue. It's a vehicle. It's really sad to me that there were two great episodes smushed into this one, with kind of a weird celebrity cameo wedge in between. Again, Christopher Lloyd was probably a great addition, and this could have been an amazing episode featuring him. But they ruined it. and it was just a standard vehicle. I have an appreciation for what they were trying to do. Don't get me wrong. And I think Bryce Dallas Howard is a genius when it comes to putting these things together. I think maybe she was dealt a hand here with some fandom that they were trying to squeeze in. It happens.
I am going superfluous red because I pity the piffle fool that has to watch this superfluous episode. So there's your red for that.
Is that officially in the lexicon now, Piffle? Going forward, we can use that?
Piffle?
I think, yeah, this is officially pending rebrand wording now is Piffle.
Piffle.
It's part of us.
Okay.
It's yeah, I think
Hashtag Piffle.
hashtag.
Well,
And it
1
be
million
used so
views
many
can't
different
be
words.
wrong. So clearly we're onto something.
Hashtag Piffle. I like it. Well, until we get back to this galaxy far, far away for the thrilling Season 3 conclusion episodes, we will leave you all to... I'm trying to think of a Lizzo reference. To Lizzo your way to the pick of destiny. I don't know.
Or
We'll see you
Piffle
next
your way.
time. Piffle your way?
Whatever. I don't know.
Ah, you don't guys used to be a
Star Wars.
All right. Until we see you again in the Jedi Master Chambers, which often brush on the silly, in the galaxy far, far away, may the Force be with you. We should be out. It says it's stopping.